2011 Stanley Cup champion, the former head coach of the Boston Bruins. It is Claude Julien. What's going on, Claude?
Oh, not much. Just waiting for those playoffs to get going. I think I'm as excited as anybody else to see how these series are going to turn out.
Fired up. I want to get your perspective. We were just talking about the Maple Leafs, the way they concluded the season with 4 straight losses. Does that weigh into the mind? And I know you can't speak for Sheldon Keefe, but the way they ended it, like, would that dawn on you at all as you get set for the playoffs?
I hope not, and I don't think so. Again, you have to look at the other side too. Boston Bruins haven't really finished on a high note either. So I think you got 2 teams there that, if you look at their record in the last few games, you hope that it's going to change once those playoffs start. And I've seen that happen before too. You know, say what you want. There wasn't a ton that both teams were risking. Obviously, the Bruins went from first to second, but at the end of the day, it's still they're in the playoffs. So I think it's more about, will they be able to elevate their game, both teams. And they have different, to my perspective anyways, they got different challenges.
You've won a cup with the Boston Bruins, but how much importance is it about having culture in an organization? And can you talk about the culture instilled by former captains in Patrice Bergeron and Zdeno Chara?
Well, Anthony, I think you're right. The culture is so huge when it comes to, especially in the playoffs. And, you know, you've got some guys in that dressing room, and even, you know, coaching staff, Chris Kelly, who was with us in 2011, who's now a coach. You got Brad Marchand, who was a rookie that year when we won the cup. He's been able to learn from guys like Chris Kelly, obviously Bergeron and Chara and all these guys, Recchi that was with us. It's important, I think, that that culture continues to be, I guess, passed on to the next generation. And now you're looking at the McAvoys, and you're looking at, you know, at guys like that, Pasternak, and you hope that that culture continues to, I guess, evolve and stay the same to a certain extent, where you know what to expect from the team. And that's where Boston is right now. And if you ask me about Toronto, this is where Toronto has to create theirs. You know, they've been a great team during the regular season for years now. Now it's time to create that culture in the playoffs, where last year they won a series. This year they need to take that next step.
Identity is a big word we use in this market quite a bit. I'm sure you've been keeping tabs in the league. Do you think the Leafs are a different team, or at the very least, do you think they're harder to play against when it matters most, and that's in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Well, you know, you look at some of the acquisitions they made, Edmondson, and obviously on the back end, they've tried to get a little bit tougher. I really think, to be honest with you, the key to the Toronto Maple Leafs right now is going to be, can their top players come out of their comfort zone? And when you look at teams that have success, and I remember, you know, watching Tampa Bay before they won their Stanley Cups, you know, the guys like Stamkos and Kucherov, and those guys were just playing the same game they played during the regular season. The following year, I remember seeing guys like Stamkos again blocking shots big time, you know, taking a hit to make a play. They were going into dirty areas, and they finally caught on to what it took to win. And I really feel that the Leafs have to do that with, you know, all of their top players. You know, everybody talks about the core 5, and of course they're the ones that have to set the tone, but the rest of the team has to follow. And I think if they can get out of that comfort zone and realize that the playoffs is about bringing it up another notch, is going to be tougher. And some of those guys have to lead the way so that the rest of the team can follow them.
You've obviously coached a while in the league, and you know sort of the market that the Toronto Maple Leafs are in. But do you think there's an appreciation for the goal scoring prowess that Austin Matthews brings on a yearly basis, you know, flirting with 60, 70 goals? And do you see that being a distraction going into the playoffs, or that's something as a team, especially a coach, you should celebrate and try to get that momentum going into the playoffs?
Well, I think you said it right at the end there. They should be celebrating the year that he's had. Like, to me, if I'm going into the last game, which they played last night, I really don't care whether he gets 70 or not. I would like to see him get 70 because it's a great number. But at the end of the day and at the end of the game, it's like, what a year you've had. We should be celebrating that. And now it's time to move on. And I think, again, like I mentioned earlier, let's take that next step. So let's push that aside. And now everybody as fans, you always want more, right? Until you win the Stanley Cup, you're never satisfied. And you hope that as players and as a team, you feel the same way. So going into the playoffs, as much as a lot of these guys have had great years and have had success, what's that next step? Do we want more? And what are we willing to do to get more? And that's where their situation is right now.
Okay, so you're devising a pre-scout for the Boston Bruins, obviously in an organization you know very, very well, Claude. If you're the Maple Leafs, what are you looking to dissect? What are you looking to sort of break down to see, hey, maybe we could have an advantage here and there?
Well, we all know, I think it's pretty obvious to everybody that knows the team that the Bruins, have great goaltending. They've got two of them that have been really good. Their back end is really strong, and so is their D game. Defensive structure is very strong. So where the Leafs, I think, have an advantage is definitely on the offensive side of things, where they can score a lot more. I think the Bruins maybe lack a little bit of depth in the scoring area. So can the Toronto Maple Leafs take advantage of trying to get to those dirty areas? We talk about, are they going to get to the net front? And that means they're going to have to take some punishment. It's not going to be easy. But if they play on the outside, they don't have a chance of winning this series. So it's about wanting to get your nose dirty. And I mentioned earlier, blocking shots, taking a hit to make a play. There's a team there that doesn't give much. So you're going to have to create, and you're going to have to make those things happen. And a lot of it will not just be by skill alone, but it'll be by commitment and dedication and wanting to go to those areas.
I don't want you to give up too many trade secrets for the Boston Bruins, but if one of the X factors is obviously Brad Marchand. If I'm Toronto, do I get involved in those theatrics? For me personally, I did not want to be on the receiving end of any of his chirps, so I left him alone. So do you leave him alone, or do you engage with him? And does he feed off that type of energy when he walks that line and gets involved physically and scoring goals as well?
Well, there's a lot to answer on that, Anthony, because I don't think as a Maple Leaf, you don't want to get caught into that, because we all know that he thrives on that. The more he can get into your kitchen, the better it is for him and for his team. He's been doing it for years. So advantage to him if you get caught up in that. I think the Leafs have to focus on what they need to do in order to win. And their whole focus should be on some of the things I talked about earlier, about what are we going to do to beat this team? Is it going to be to try and retaliate with Marchand or get caught up in what he's trying to do? Or is it going to be about us trying to get inside this hockey club and score some goals and win some hockey games? That's where your focus has to be, and it should be that way. And I think again, the Maple Leafs, if you look at the rosters, I think it's pretty obvious that the Leafs roster is deeper. But then when you look at the culture and the structure, this is where the Boston Bruins have had an advantage over a lot of teams for many years. So you got to try and get into that and try and defeat that part of their game.
A big topic of conversation has been the line shuffling and the constant line juggling. And the last 6 weeks or so, they've been tinkering with, spreading out the wealth, if you will, with Matthews, Marner, and Nylander. Do you like that game plan, at least to start here against a team like Boston? Like, I'm always so careful to dissect the Bruins, and Claude, you know this. Like, even without Bergeron and Krejci, there hasn't been a drop-off, right? With Zacha and Coyle, and just every player knows their role on that team. But do you think that's a good way to attack it, knowing that maybe Boston's depth isn't the same as maybe, say, like a Florida or other teams up the middle?
Well, kudos to those guys that stepped in for Krejci and obviously Bergeron, like Coyle and even Zacha. They've done a great job. But, with no disrespect, they're still not Bergeron, they're still not Krejci. So, yes, there's a reason to want to take advantage of that if they can. Again, their structure has held them to where they are today, and that's one of the top teams in the league. And we keep going back to that because everything that's happened over the past 3-4 years of, from Chara leaving, and again, those two guys we just mentioned, again, retiring, that team doesn't seem to miss a beat. And every year that team starts, and last year was the fact that Marchand and Coyle were out for the first few months, and they still managed to overcome that. This year was those two guys, two centermen, and they overcame that. So you can never, discount that team because of the fact that they have a culture that's been built in there, and everybody they seem to bring on board seems to buy into what they're doing. So that's one of the things that I guess you have to give them an advantage on. And at the end of the day, this is a great opportunity, I think, for Toronto, honestly, to create their own culture by showing people they can take that next step. And you know what? If they just want to rely on what they did all year and rely on their skill and the fact that they're great goal scoring team and that they're exciting to watch that way, if they're just going to rely on that, I don't think they're going to succeed. And I think it's important for them, like I mentioned, teams that have won, you see them, and then there's always a player that'll come up big in all these things. Last year, you look at Florida, they were one game away from being knocked out. All of a sudden, and you guys all remember Keith Tkachuk saying they were a soft team, and it kind of woke them up, right? And all of a sudden, they're now like they're a pretty tough team. They pushed back a lot, and they went into the playoffs, and they were a gritty team, and they learned what it took to be successful. That's what you want to see the Maple Leafs do.
Yeah, there's still a couple days for Ty Domi to hit the airways. Maybe he comes on this show and he's what? Like he just calls a team out. Very, very unlikely. How would you handicap this series? Take that Bruins chapeau off. Just looking at this series, how would you look at it? Do you think the Leafs have a good chance? Like, how do you break it down?
This is one of those series where I really honestly put it 50-50. Again, we talked about earlier, both those teams didn't really finish on high notes. But again, we've seen that before where, playoffs are starting, Saturday, and I'm focused and I'm ready to go. And all of a sudden, both teams start playing the way everybody knows they can play. Again, will the Leafs goaltending, which, has been up and down all year, will they get great goaltending? Because they're going to need it, and that's an important part of the game. And they have had some great goaltending, this year at times. So it's all about timing, right? You want to make sure they get that. I like the fact that, when we're talking about, they got a little bit tougher on the back end. I think they needed that. It's okay to have puck-moving defensemen that can, create some offense, but you also need guys that can defend and guys that can punish guys and discourage guys from going to the front of the net. And that's why I thought that Edmondson was and Benoit were great acquisitions for that team to kind of balance things out.
As much as I love doing this with you, you're 63 years young, clearly watched the game and you know what's going on. What are the chances we see you behind the NHL bench as soon as next season again?
Well, to be honest with you, I really felt that I needed a break after I left Montreal. All these years of coaching from junior to the NHL, I never had a full season unless it was a lockout, but we're still working at that point where I never was able to take a step back. And I realized that after I did, felt much better. And to be honest with you, I'd be ready to give it another go under the right circumstances. No doubt, I feel energized again, and again feel really sharp. And when I watch some of the games and some of the teams, you sit back and say, I think I've got the answer to this hockey club here. So hopefully, teams still have my number, and maybe I get a phone call at some point.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Roseau. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.